now know that we can either reverse or slow down the aging process.
Aging is going to be a crisis. By the year 2030, I think it is, there'll be 55 million of us over the age of 70.
What we'd really like to do is to extend the health span of individuals while they're alive. If we can maintain health, that's an important goal.
I certainly hope that the geneticists are able to come up with programs that can help stop the diseases that ravage us. If you came up with a gene that could help a person with cystic fibrosis or Alzheimer's, we're going to support that. But I do not believe that in the near future they will have that elusive magic gene that will give you an extra 20 years onto your lifespan.
It depends exactly on what the damage is and how it's defined. There are some that would be impossible to reverse. Others, you might reverse it in a genetically modified way, but that's not the biologic way. You can't, the biologic way is like a symphony, everything interacting and coming in at the right time and at the right volume and the right note. A lot of the interventions that we have are just like hitting it with a hammer. That you just have a one-shot deal. It's not biologic. It's not natural, and therefore it doesn't integrate with the body in the same way as the natural processes do.
What they have failed to establish and have failed to recognize is that the gene can only be as good in expressing itself as the medium in which you allow to exist. So you take the high levels of stress and pollution and the overeating and undernourishment, and you have adversely affected that gene. I believed that the answer is not limited to the genes, but rather the milieu in which the gene expresses itself. And with that in mind, I wanted to test it. As a scientist, as an educator, I knew that anything I did that was not scientifically based would not be accepted. So I took a group of people, average people, and I gave them all the same identical protocol. That protocol was followed originally for 9 months, and there were some improvements. Definite things good happened to those people. But then I realized 9 months is not enough time, because I found that you can't even cleanse the body properly of heavy metals and like mercury and lead and cadmium that we've accumulated over a lifetime. And remember, the fact that you no longer smoke or you no longer drink doesn't mean that the damage that was done when you did is still present in your body. It doesn't repair itself. That's what they're looking for the genetic expression to do. That's what they want to do and charge you for. They want to repair the damage to your cell, and good for them if they can do it, but think of what you're going to pay for that. I believe that we could do it naturally. I did not believe that we had such imperfections in the body we could not repair the gene when its expression was in some way altered through stress and stress hormones like cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine and adrenaline, through living and working in toxic environments, exposed to things we were never in the past told were bad for us, exposed to the toxic psychic energy of simply being around people who are always depressed or angry or violent. You are affected by that. Someone will say, yeah, we'll prove it. Well, we can now. It's called psychoneuroimmunology. We can prove that every thought instantaneously expresses itself with biochemical markers. Happy thoughts, happy biochemistry. Negative, sad, depressing, fearful, anxious thoughts, bad biochemistry. In time, one leads to wellness, the other leads to disease, and it's cumulative. To get another perspective from a physician and academic, assistant clinical professor of neurology at Cornell, and also board certified in neurology, is Dr. Jay Lombard. What do you believe is possible in slowing down and reversing the aging process? Do you believe it's all in the genes, or do you believe that we can affect the genes by the changes and choices we have?
I clearly believe that the environment plays a major impact in slowing the aging process down. And I look at it as the 3 R's. The first R is to reduce, The second R is to recharge, and the third R is to regenerate. And when I speak about reducing, we're talking about the effects of toxins, for instance, and what that has on our immune system, because we know that many neurological diseases are linked to excessive immune system activity. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, even autism and depression are linked to excessive immune system activity. So the first aspect of taking care is to reduce an excessive immune system activity, which could be initiated by either environmental toxins, like some of the things that you mentioned in the program already today, but also emotional toxins, because emotional toxins clearly can be an initiator of many, many diseases, including
Give us an
neurological.
example of what you mean.
In regards to emotional toxins?
Yeah.
Well, very often I ask patients, when did they first get sick with multiple sclerosis or with ALS? And very, very frequently, they predate the onset of their disease with some major emotional catastrophic event that occurred in their lives that sort of set off a trigger. And as what Gary mentioned earlier, is that every thought that we have clearly has a biochemical effect on our cells, especially in our brains. So we now know that there are signals in our cells, genetic signals actually, that can be considered either life signals or death signals for a cell. And life signals are various things, including affirmations that we give ourselves, and death signals are the negative signals that are thoughts that are actually destructive to our well-being. So the field of psychoneuroimmunology is clearly a direct link to many neurological problems.
The other aspect to aging is Neutralite deficiency. By that I mean vitamins and minerals and certain proteins and amino acids that we require. Our gastrointestinal tract loses the efficiency of absorption. For example, there have been studies that have shown that about 55% of people above the age of 65 are deficient in vitamin B6. And that's become very, very important now, as you know, because atherosclerosis has been related to folate deficiency and B6 deficiency and homocystinuria. And so, but B6 plays other roles that are maybe important, the maintenance of neural function and so forth, and certainly stimulation of immunity.
So the idea is that when you take a look at your diet, the American diet is filled with processed foods, fatty foods, excessive phosphorus, protein, and lots of growth-stimulating hormones and chemicals and pesticides. We become toxic waste sites.
The rule of thumb was always, you know, you should beware of foods that are imported because they don't have the same stringent pesticide control laws or bans that we have here. Yet here, is it being, are they being checked? Are these these growers, are they really adhering to the policies of pesticide bans, paraquat, et cetera? So, you know, sometimes we as nutritionists we scratch our head and say, well, you know, I would have said that, you know, grown in America is fine, and then all of a sudden, you know, here it comes in the newspaper, this is just as bad. So it's really difficult, I think.
This interferes with enzymes and nutrients. That helps produce free radicals. That limits the healing power at the cellular level. And since no one's told, feed your immune system, feed your spleen, feed the thymus gland, cleanse your body's little septic toxic systems that help trap the pollutants under your armpits, across your breasts, and your groin. These are called lymph nodes. When was the last time anyone told you, A, what a lymph node does, and B, how it helps remove toxins, viruses, bacteria, and cancer cells out of the body? They don't. One becomes enlarged, they cut it out. So, the program was based upon flooding the body with healing nutrients. And where do you get healing nutrients? You get them in the least processed form as possible. First, you eliminate all animal proteins. No dairy, no meat, no chicken, no sugar, no artificial sweeteners, no chemicalized foods, no heavily processed foods, no deep-fried foods. And we made it fresh, as much as possible fresh and organic.
If you can't pronounce it, if you don't understand it, if you can't spell it, you couldn't spell it backwards, don't eat it, or at least ask what it is. I think we need to be really very proactive about what gets put in our food.
One of the variables that's been of great interest to us and to gerontologists in general is the change in glucose and in insulin metabolism as people get older. It's the change in those factors that lead to the development of one of the important diseases of old age, that is diabetes. So from early on, we have been evaluating that and testing people for how well they can handle a load of glucose. So yes, having a high blood sugar still causes harm to people. It leads to all of the complications of diabetes that occur in younger people. Similarly, a high blood cholesterol leads to an increase in coronary disease in the old people in the Baltimore longitudinal study. So you don't just tolerate it by saying, oh, well, it's just a normal change with aging. It's not. It's a disease and has to be treated. And the same thing is true of high blood pressure, which you don't tolerate. We can now treat it very effectively.
So what we do is we let go of the fatty foods, not fat, fat's essential, but we get our fats from nuts and avocado and grains, healthy fats, and primrose oil and flaxseed oil and cold water fish. And instead, we focus upon vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, tubers, starchy vegetables, and we eat based upon what our body needs. Because how often have you eaten based upon your appetite? You're hungry, you eat. All right? You're sad, you eat. You're nervous, you eat. You're depressed, you eat. But when was the last time you said, I'm eating because my body requires the nutrients? And that's what we focused on. Healthy, wonderful, gourmet meals, but a major meal in the middle of the day, a really nice healthy breakfast, and a small meal in the end of the day. And people began to lose weight. They lost weight for the first time in their lives without dieting.
Part of the clue for aging research in the future, I think, will be to try to understand the mechanisms that caloric restriction switches the body to, and then try to manipulate those through diet, exercise, or some sort of therapeutic intervention.
Caloric restriction is the one intervention that has worked in every system in which it's been adequately tested. It has not yet been adequately tested in primates, including humans, but it's the one intervention that has always worked when it's a well-done experiment.
Now, we've known for about 50 years that we could make mice live longer by restricting their calories in their diet. And if one keeps mice on a calorically restricted diet, they can live up to twice as long as control animals.
This is not a diet. This is a way of living. And people's energy level came up. Their sleep went down. Their vitality came up. Their sense of focus and concentration, cognitive awareness increased. Short-term memory increased. Now, to this diet, we added in exercise, starting with what a person could do and gradually increasing it to an hour a day of aerobic and non-aerobic combined. Power walking, biking, and lifting light weights. And then the people's bodies started to change. Their percentage of body fat changed. How do we know this? Because everyone had to take an impedance test, which measures your fat, your lean muscle tissue, water composition. Most people, by the way, over the age of 40 were dehydrated. People as they age do not drink enough. And the part of the brain that tells them you've got to drink doesn't work as well. People suffer from what is called hydrodipsia. They don't drink when they should. And when they do drink, they frequently drink things that are really foolish, such as coffee. Coffee is really bad because it's a diuretic. It flushes out minerals, trace elements, and water that we want. By taking all this out of the diet, soft drinks and coffee and sugar, and replacing it with fresh juices, starting with 1 juice a day for the first month, and then 2 juices for the second month, and 3 juices for the third month, 4 juices for the fourth month, and making sure that the person was taking the vegetable juices like cucumber and celery with aloe vera, and then some greens in there, and then if they were not diabetic or hypoglycemic, they could have fruit juices, primarily watermelon juice, which is a real cleanser and detoxifier. They were flooding their body with hundreds and hundreds of phytochemicals. And here's what I discovered. I discovered that the phytochemicals in green vegetables cleanse and detoxify. These are what help protect us, and the science is there to show they help anti-cancer, antiviral, antibacterial, anti-yeast, antifungal. That's what your greens do. Greens purify the body. They're crucial to the purification process. But the fruits are what no one's had. Americans don't eat much fruit. Look at all the national surveys. They're not eating what the body requires. In fact, kids don't eat fruits at all. It's not sweet enough for them. They eat the fruit drinks and the candies. So when you're hooked on candy, your level of glucose acceptance, sweetness acceptance is so high that a natural fruit may actually taste bitter. In fact, in one study, kids were given a choice of orange juice or orange drink, which was just sugar water. They chose the orange drink. And we should be having 9 servings of fruit and vegetables combined in a day. The average American, 1 serving of vegetables and less than a serving of fruit. And for many Americans, the only way they get their 1 serving of vegetables is because French fries are now considered a vegetable. Right? So what we did is people got as many as 14 servings of vegetables and fruits a day. And in the fruit juices, by using lemon and lime, the whole skin, the seed, and grapefruit, the whole seed, and which has caprylic acid in it, and the skin, they were getting hundreds of phytochemicals that not only detoxified, but here's what the fruits did. They could repair damage to the DNA. Now that's what all these geneticists have been trying to do, repair the damage to the DNA.
The body has several systems for detoxifying these compounds before they can do damage. There are enzymatic systems like superoxide dismutase and catalase. There are vitamins like vitamin E and vitamin C that are good antioxidants. But the problem is that although these decrease the amount of damage and they decrease these free radical species of oxygen, nothing's 100%. So eventually, if you study an animal throughout its lifespan, you'll see an increase in the oxidatively damaged molecules in DNA. You can see oxidatively damaged amino acids and proteins. So I think because our repair isn't 100%, one of the causes of aging is oxidative damage. And there's pretty good evidence in every species that has been studied that that's a cause of aging.
Free radicals lie at the heart of most damage theories of aging. Free radicals perhaps do their greatest damage through a process of fusing DNA and protein molecules referred to as cross-linking. Unlike the contents of cells, the body cannot produce new strands of DNA. The best it can do is repair them, but not always. In addition to damaging DNA, cross-linking results in the body's essential proteins becoming stiff and therefore unable to function correctly. This process is responsible for many of the symptoms most often associated with aging: cataracts, wrinkles, brittle bones, kidney failure, hardening of the arteries, and immune deficiency. Cross-linking is particularly prevalent in diabetes, as glucose fuels the process and helps explain why diabetics, well, they have all these problems because in effect they're prematurely aging. In order to combat the dangers of free radicals, it's important to identify where they come from, and as I previously stated, look where they come from. They come from your food, they come from a polluted environment, from smoking, from alcohol. They are produced also as byproducts of just normal cellular activity, as well as in response to both physiological and psychological stress. An example found in our environment in the form of toxic waste and chemicals and pesticides and sunlight and radiation, as well as dietary sources. You drink coffee, you have alcohol, you had fried food like French fries, you have hamburgers, barbecued foods, you're producing a lot of free radicals. The trick in keeping free radicals under control is to avoid them in the first place and to make certain that the body is well supplied with antioxidants to ward them off if we cannot. Most people are familiar with at least some of the benefits attributed to such popular antioxidants as vitamin C, vitamin E, and beta-carotene. The first line of defense against the excess buildup of oxygen at the molecular level consists of 3 protective enzymes naturally found in the body: superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase.
If you overexpress these enzymes, specifically the mitochondrial and the cytosolic superoxide dismutase, you can actually extend the lifespan about 15%. So there's not these major effects, but 15% for one gene is significant. So if you do manipulate the amount of free radical damage, you can have an effect on both aging and lifespan. And because you're affecting, there's not as much oxidative damage, you also affect the quality of life. They actually are able to function.
Free radicals are defeated essentially by being trapped or isolated and not allowing to seek out electrons from neighboring cells. Free radicals can then be metabolized and turned into harmless paired oxygen molecules or simply water. Dietary sources of antioxidants can produce similar effects. While dietary antioxidants that you're going to get from your juicing and your vegetables and your fruits and also supplements like vitamin C are extremely useful in fighting against free radicals. This is not the only place they are needed in the body. The more antioxidants involved in this fight, the less are available overall.
We know now a lot about how these processes occur. We know a lot about what the natural cell defenses are, and they occur at 3 different levels. Cells sop up oxygen-free radicals with certain compounds like glutathione and vitamin E. Cells have enzymes which break down oxygen-free radicals. Cells repair oxygen-free radical damage with DNA repair enzymes and so on. And when cells become damaged beyond repair, there is a mechanism called apoptosis, which gets rid of the cells that are potentially dangerous to the cells around them because they've become damaged. Now we have to replace those damaged cells with new cells. And in order to do that, we have to have cells that are waiting to grow, to divide, and differentiate into functional cells. And that's where the telomere story and the Hayflick limit come in. When you run out of cells to replace the damaged cells, or when the cells that are in waiting, the cells that are in reserve become damaged, then where do you go? And now you're old and frail.
The brain imaging program in the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging has shown us a number of things about age differences and age changes in the brain. So when I talk about age differences, for example, we're looking at people of different ages studied at the same point in time. And we see that older people have a brain that looks somewhat different than younger people. For example, the fluid-filled spaces in the brain are much larger in older people. The fluid areas around the surface of the brain are also much larger. And we take these as an index of tissue loss. So that's one of the things that we've learned about the structure of the brain. Now, when we look at the same person over time, even over as short a time period as 1 year, we see the fluid-filled spaces increase over 1 year in most of the participants in the study.
Until recently, in fact, until most people would have read it in the New York Times or another publication, where it showed that neurons were able to reactivate themselves, we had said, not true. What's damaged in the brain is damaged forever.
Right.
And people have to accept their limitation. So what happened was people wouldn't even try hyperbaric oxygen or magnets or anything else because it couldn't happen. They were determined to protect the dogma and weren't allowing it to be challenged. All these decades, and now it's being challenged.
Right.
And finding that the dogma has to change.
Well, it's an exciting time to be a neurologist because I think I grew up in a time when that dogma was still very much taught in medical school and also in residency. And I think clearly there are cracks in the armor. It's not completely cracked yet, the dogma. It takes a long time to reduce the dogma, but there's no doubt that this has turned upside down the idea that the brain does have regenerative capacity, and we actually can do things to help regenerate the brain through our lifestyle. And
that's the next thing I want to talk about. What are some of the things you've seen that will actually help people rejuvenate brain?
Well, I mean, I'm very specific in regards to the types of diseases that I treat. People don't come asking me for an anti-aging protocol, but I see a lot of patients with Alzheimer's disease, for instance, which the first thing to do is to educate the physician and the family members that there are things to do for Alzheimer's disease, that this is not an irreversible condition, and that you can actually inhibit the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And the ways of doing that, for instance, is by slowing down excessive immune system activity. The immune system is instrumental in the pathological changes that occur in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's. So putting a wet blanket on the brain on fire that's occurring in Alzheimer's disease is very important. And as you mentioned, antioxidants is one of the instrumental ways of slowing down the adverse effects of the immune system in that disorder. Other ways of reducing the immune system activity are anti-inflammatories. There are natural compounds called COX-2 inhibitors. These are new drugs actually which were developed for anti-inflammation, but we know that certain herbs also have this COX-2 capacity, which is a very profound anti-inflammatory substance found in nature.
Most people, blame Alzheimer's on beta-amyloid, which is a protein sludge, so to speak, which is formed throughout the body, and beta-amyloid damages neural cells. Everybody thinks it's a direct toxic effect, but there's evidence that beta-amyloid produces inflammation, and it's the inflammation which produces vascular constriction, which decreases the blood supply to the brain, and we think Alzheimer's is a reversible disease, and it's due to blood flow.
Omega-3 essential oils are also very profound anti-inflammatories to reduce excessive immune system activity. So the first step, again, the first R is to actually stop the progression, to reduce excessive inflammation. The second R in restoring neurological function is to recharge. Every cell of our body has within it what's called the mitochondria. And as you do every activity, whether you run a marathon as Gary does, or you're thinking right now, every cell in your body to actually perform healthy has to manufacture ATP. And that ATP is the energy currency of a cell. And the mitochondria is what makes that ATP. And we know as we age, our mitochondria are producing less and less of that ATP, that essential fuel for our bodies to run our cells, to run our brains, to run our hearts, to run our muscles. So the second R is to recharge, and you can recharge through things that actually increase mitochondrial function. Things like creatine, coenzyme Q10, L-carnitine, acetyl L-carnitine are all very helpful to empower the mitochondria to make more ATP. And the third is to regenerate, and I think that's really going to be the wave of the future of neurology, looking at things like hormones, the effects of DHEA, as the ability to restore neurons that have been injured. CDP choline, which is a derivative of choline, very important to rebuild cell membranes. And there's a host of things. Estrogen, very, very important. We know that women have a higher incidence of Alzheimer's disease than men do, and we think that estrogen has a protective or a neuroprotective effect on the aging process, particularly in the brain. Women who take estrogen or take soy phytoestrogens actually have a better, less incidence of having Alzheimer's disease than women who do not have hormone replacement therapy. So that's the third R, is to actually regenerate.
Great information.
Thank you.